Welcome back. The night is quiet. The city drifts into sleep. Yet in the silence, a secret remains. And Sherlock Holmes is here, ready to uncover what the darkness tries to hide. In the fog-choked alleys of Victorian London, a chilling parcel arrives at 2-1B Baker Streeter, plaster death mask, moulded from the face of Dr. Elias Thorne, a British museum curator supposedly dead from a heart attack. Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson plunge into a web of ancient Egyptian relics, where envy, betrayal, and a cursed pharaoh's mask entangle Thorne's widow, his son, a rival professor, and a sinister smuggler. Plastered dust in the lungs, a ransacked room, and a gunshot in the dark point to murder. But here's the twist. Thorne isn't dead. He's alive, hidden in a secret vault, and the real killer is still out there, watching Holmes, ready to make him the next victim. Can Holmes unravel the truth before the mask claims another life? Chapter 1. The ennui of Sherlock Holmes. It was during the closing days of October in the year 1895, when the leaves of Regent's Park had turned to a russet hue, and the chill winds from the north began to whisper of impending winter, that I found myself once more drawn to the familiar precincts of Baker Street. My marriage to Mary Morstan, now some 4 years past, had established me in a comfortable practice in Paddington, where the demands of ailing patients and the routine of domestic life had gradually distanced me from the whirlwind of adventure that had once been my daily fare. Yet the ties of friendship and the allure of intellectual stimulation proved unbreakable, and on this particular afternoon, with my consulting rooms unexpectedly quiet, I resolved to pay a visit to my old comrade, Sherlock Holmes. The streets of London were enveloped in a dense fog, that peculiar atmospheric phenomena so characteristic of our metropolis, which transforms the bustling thoroughfares into a labyrinth of shadows and muffled sounds. Hansom cabs clattered by with their lamps flickering like will-o'-the-wisps, and pedestrians loomed suddenly from the murk, only to vanish again into its embrace. As I approached number 2-1B, the gas lamps along the pavement cast elongated pools of light, illuminating the brass plate that bore Holmes's name in letters that had grown somewhat tarnished with time. I ascended the 17 steps familiar as the lines on my own palm, and rapped upon the door with the head of my walking dash-stick. Mrs. Hudson, our long-suffering landlady, admitted me with her customary blend of warmth and exasperation. Dr. Watson, sir, it's good to see you. Mr. Holmes is in one of his moods again, hasn't touched a morsel since breakfast, and the air up there is thick enough to cut with a knife from all his tobacco. I smiled at her concern, knowing well the eccentricities she endured. Thank you, Mrs. Hudson. I'll see what I can do to rouse him. The sitting-room door stood ajar, and as I entered, a wave of blue smoke assailed my nostrils, the acrid scent of Holmes's favoured shag tobacco mingling with the faint odour of chemicals from his latest experiment. The room itself was a testament to his singular mind. Bookshelves groaned under the weight of volumes on criminology, chemistry, and arcane subjects. The mantelpiece bore the marks of his Persian slipper stuffed with tobacco, and the correspondence skewered upon a jackknife. And in the corner, his Stradivarius violin lay neglected upon a chair, its bow dangling precariously. Holmes himself reclined in his armchair by the fire, his long, thin legs stretched out before him, his fingers steepled beneath his chin in that attitude of profound contemplation I knew so well. His aquiline features, sharpened by days of inaction, bore the pallor of one who shunned the daylight, and his grey eyes, usually so keen and piercing, now gazed vacantly into the flickering flames. He was clad in his mouse-colored dressing gown, the sleeves frayed from constant use, and upon the table beside him lay a hypodermic syringe, its needle glinting ominously, a relic of his occasional recourse to the 7% solution of cocaine, which he employed to stimulate his brain when cases were scarce. "Ah, Watson," he murmured without turning his head, his voice languid yet laced with a hint of relief. "Your step upon the stair is unmistakable, heavier than Billy's, lighter than Lestrade's, and with that slight limp from your Giselle bullet, which worsens in damp weather. Come, sit by the fire and tell me of the world outside. Has Paddington yielded any mysteries beyond the common cold?" I chuckled as I took my accustomed seat opposite him, removing my hat and gloves. "Nothing to rival your exploits, Holmes. A case of influenza here, a sprained ankle, there are the ailments of ordinary folk. But you, my friend, you look as though the weight of boredom presses upon you like the fog upon the city." He sighed deeply, reaching for his pipe and filling it with deliberate care. "Boredom, Watson, is the curse of the thinking man. The criminal classes seem to have entered a period of unprecedented virtue. Not a forgery, not a blackmail, not even a decent murder to engage my faculties. I have resorted to analyzing the mud splatters on the boots of passers-by from the window, but even that palls after a time." As he spoke, I glanced around the room, noting the signs of his recent activities. Upon the deal table lay a retort and test tubes, residues of some chemical analysis, perhaps an attempt to identify a new poison or ink. Scattered newspapers covered the floor, their headlines screaming of mundane events. A scandal in high society, a railway accident in the Midlands, the ongoing debates in Parliament over the Irish question. Holmes had evidently scoured them for any hint of intrigue, only to discard them in disgust. "Tell me," I ventured, seeking to draw him out, "have you no unfinished business from our past adventures? The affair of the Greek interpreter, or that curious matter with the naval treaty? Surely there are threads yet to unravel." He waved a dismissive hand, exhaling a cloud of smoke that curled towards the ceiling. "Mere trifles, Watson," resolved and filed away in my mental index. "No, what I crave is a problem of complexity, a Gordian knot that defies the ordinary blade. The human brain, like a fine instrument, rusts without use." We fell into a companionable silence, broken only by the crackle of the fire and the distant rumble of traffic. I reflected upon the years we had shared this room, the thrill of the chase in the case of the speckled band, the intellectual duel with Professor Moriarty at Reichenbach, from which Holmes had miraculously returned after his presumed death. His resurrection had been a source of profound joy to me, yet it also underscored the perilous nature of his pursuits. Since then, we had encountered vampires in Sussex, a giant rat in Sumatra tales I had chronicled with varying degrees of embellishment, always mindful of Holmes's insistence on scientific rigor to divert him. I recounted a minor incident from my practice, a patient who claimed to be haunted by visions, which upon examination proved to be the effects of laudanum overuse. Holmes listened with half-closed eyes, interjecting occasionally with a pointed question that revealed his undiminished acuity. "Delusions induced by opiates," he remarked at length, "common enough, but consider the potential for exploitation. A clever villain might administer such a substance to discredit a witness or heir. Ah, but where is the villain now?" His melancholy deepened, and he rose abruptly, pacing the room with long strides. "Watson, you are a steadfast friend, but even your company cannot dispel this ennui. Perhaps I shall take up beekeeping in Sussex, as I once jested, or compose a monograph on the polyphonic motets of Lassus. I was about to suggest a walk-in. The park when a sharp knock echoed from below. Mrs. Hudson's voice called up the stairs. "A parcel for you, Mr. Holmes." Delivered by hand, no return address. Holmes's demeanor transformed in an instant. His eyes sharpened, his posture straightened. "Bring it up, Mrs. Hudson." "Watson, this may be the very spark we need." The landlady entered, bearing a small, brown paper package tied with twine and sealed with red wax. She placed it on the table with a curious glance before withdrawing. Holmes examined it externally, his magnifying glass in hand, scrutinizing every detail. "Postmarked from the British Museum District," he observed. "The paper is of good quality, the twine common hemp. No fingerprints visible, but a faint scent papyrus. Or is it plaster? The weight suggests something solid, not documents." I leaned forward, my medical instincts alert. Could it be dangerous? A bomb, perhaps, from some old enemy. Holmes smiled. "Faintly, unlikely, Watson. The wrapping is too meticulous for malice. Bombers are seldom artists, but caution is prudent." With his pocket knife, he severed the twine and peeled back the paper. Inside lay a death mask, cast in pristine white plaster, depicting the features of an elderly man. The eyes were closed. In eternal slumber, the lips slightly parted, the beard trimmed with precision. A small scar marred the left brow, and the overall expression was one of peaceful resignation. "Extraordinary," Holmes breathed, lifting it carefully. "This is no antique. The plaster is fresh, the cast taken recently. Observe the detail, the wrinkles, the pores, even the faint stubble. A master craftsman's work." I shuddered involuntarily. The mask's lifelike quality evoking a sense of the macabre. "Whose face is this, and why sent to you?" Holmes turned it over, revealing an inscription etched into the base. "For the eyes that see all, a challenge, Watson, or a plea." The phrase suggests knowledge of my methods. As for the identity weight, this scar, the high forehead, it reminds me of Dr. Elias Thorne, the Egyptologist at the British Museum. I met him once at a lecture on hieroglyphics. Before I could respond, Holmes set the mask down and reached for his index of biographies, flipping through the pages with rapid fingers. "Yes, Thorne, born 1835, educated at Oxford, expeditions to Thebes and Luxor. Curator since 1880, noted for his work on funerary artifacts." The fog outside seemed to thicken, casting the room in a gloomier light. Holmes's excitement was palpable. The ennui had vanished like mist before the sun. "We must investigate, Watson. This mask arrived for a reason, and I suspect it portends something grave." Thus began what would prove to be one of the most perplexing cases in our annals. But at that moment, as Holmes donned his coat and called for a cab, I felt only the familiar thrill of adventure stirring in my veins. To elaborate further, without repetition, I must recall the precise atmosphere of that afternoon. The clock on the mantel ticked steadily, marking the passage of time in a room where time often seemed suspended during Holmes's periods of inactivity. I watched as he handled the mask, his fingers tracing the contours with the delicacy of a surgeon. His mind, I knew, was already weaving hypotheses, discarding the implausible, retaining the possible. "Consider the method of casting," he said, his voice animated. "Death masks are typically made from the deceased, using alginate or plaster to capture the features before rigor mortis sets in. This one shows no distortion, suggesting it was taken soon after death, perhaps within hours. I nodded, drawing upon my own knowledge from the Afghan campaign, where I had seen similar mementos, made of fallen comrades. But why send it anonymously? And the inscription, it's almost poetic. Poetic, yes, but purposeful. Eyes that see all. A reference to my deductive powers, or perhaps to the Egyptian god Horus, the all-seeing eye. Thorne's field is Egyptology. There may be a connection. He placed the mask upon the table, angling it to catch the light from the window. The fog pressed against the panes, distorting the view of the street below, where a newsboy's cry echoed faintly. Evening Standard. Curator found dead at museum. Holmes froze, then strode to the door, flinging it open. Billy, fetch the paper. Page boy scampered up with the edition, and Holmes snatched it, his eyes scanning the columns. Listen to this, Watson. Tragic death of Dr. Elias Thorne. The eminent curator was discovered this morning in his office at the British Museum, apparently succumbed to heart failure. No foul play suspected. The coincidence struck us both like a thunderbolt. The mask was Thorne's, undeniably, now that we compared it to the description in the article. This changes everything, Holmes declared. The mask was cast from the dead man himself, and sent to me as, what, a taunt, a clue. We spent the next hour discussing possibilities. Holmes paced, puffing furiously at his pipe, while I offered suggestions from my armchair. Could it be a rival scholar, a thief of artifacts, or something more sinister tied to Thorne's recent expedition? As the evening drew on, Mrs. Hudson brought up tea and scones, which Holmes ignored but I partook of gratefully. The fire was stoked, casting dancing shadows on the walls, and Holmes finally settled, his mind racing ahead. Tomorrow, Watson, we visit the museum, but tonight, let us ponder the enigma of the death mask. Chapter 2. The curator's demise. The morning following the arrival of the mysterious death mask broke with a sullen sky, the fog of the previous day having given way to a persistent drizzle that slicked the cobblestones of Baker Street and rendered the air heavy with the scent of wet stone and coal smoke. Sherlock Holmes, invigorated by the prospect of a case that promised to tax his faculties, was already dressed and pacing the sitting room when I descended from my old bedroom, where I had stayed the night at his insistence. His dressing had been discarded in favor of his severe black frock coat, and his eyes, now alight with purpose, betrayed none of the languor that had plagued him only hours before. Watson, he greeted me briskly, you are just in time. I have sent a wire to Inspector Lestrade, requesting his presence at the British Museum. We must examine the scene of Dr. Thorne's demise without delay. Your medical expertise will be invaluable. I nodded, adjusting my collar against the chill. You suspect foul play, then? The papers suggested natural causes. Holmes's lips curled into a faint, sardonic smile. The papers, my dear Watson, are often the last to know the truth. Heart failure is a convenient verdict when one wishes to avoid scrutiny. Come, the game is afoot. We took a hansom cab through the rain-soaked streets, the clatter of hooves and the creak of wheels forming a familiar symphony as we navigated the thoroughfares of London. The British Museum loomed before us, its neoclassical facade imposing, even under the grey pallor of the morning. The great portico, flanked by Ionic columns, seemed to guard secrets as ancient as the artifacts within. We were met at the entrance by Inspector Lestrade, his ferret-like features pinched with irritation beneath the brim of his bowler hat. Holmes, he said, shaking off the rain from his coat, I might have known you'd stick your nose into this. Dr. Thorne was an old man, worked himself to death over those dusty relics. The coroner's satisfied heart gave out, plain and simple. Holmes's eyes narrowed as he adjusted his scarf. And yet Lestrade, a death mask of the man, arrives at my door within hours of his passing, inscribed with a cryptic message. Coincidence is a lazy man's explanation. Show us the scene. With a grudging sigh, Lestrade led us through the museum's labyrinthine corridors, past glass cases filled with Grecian urns, Assyrian friezes, and the enigmatic Rosetta Stone, which gleamed dully under the gaslights. The air was thick with the musty odor of antiquity, mingled with the faint tang of preserving chemicals. Scholars and visitors moved quietly, their footsteps echoing on the marble floors. But our destination lay beyond the public galleries, in the private offices of the Antiquities Department. Dr. Elias Thorne's office was a chamber of ordered chaos, a reflection of a mind devoted to the past. Shelves lined the walls, groaning under the weight of leather-bound tomes. Rolled papyri and fragments of pottery meticulously labelled in a spidery hand. A large desk dominated the center, its surface cluttered with papers, an inkstand, and a half-unpacked wooden crate bearing the stamp of a Cairo shipping firm. The chair behind it was askew, as if its occupant had risen in haste, and a faint scattering of white dust coated the floor near the desk. No body now, Lestrade said, gesturing to the chair. The night watchman found him slumped here at 6 this morning. Doctor examined him, said it was his heart. He was taken to the morgue an hour ago. Holmes knelt beside the desk, his magnifying glass in hand, his movements precise and deliberate. Plastered dust, he murmured, scraping a sample into a small envelope. Fresh, finely ground, not the residue of crumbling artifacts. And here, he pointed to a smudge on the blotter, barely visible to the untrained eye. Wax, Lestrade. A sealing compound, likely from that crate. Curious, is it not, that a man dies in the midst of unpacking an Egyptian shipment? Lestrade shrugged. Curators handle crates all the time. Maybe he overexerted himself. Or, Holmes countered. Rising, someone ensured he would never handle another. He moved to the crate, peering inside. It contained straw packing and several wrapped objects. But one item caught his attention. A plaster mold, partially broken, as if discarded in haste. This mold is recent, Watson. See the smoothness. Not the work of an ancient craftsman, but of someone skilled in modern casting techniques. I examined the room with a physician's eye, noting the absence of overt signs of struggle, no overturned furniture, no bloodstains. Yet the air felt heavy with an unspoken narrative. If it was murder, I ventured, how was it done? No wounds were reported. Holmes's gaze flicked to me, a spark of approval in his eyes. Precisely the question, Watson. Heart failure can mask many sins, suffocation, even fright. We need the autopsy report, but first, let us reconstruct the scene. Thorne was working late, alone, unpacking this crate. Something or someone interrupted him. He moved to the window, which overlooked a narrow courtyard. The sash was locked, but Holmes's fingers traced a faint scratch on the frame. Forced entry. Unlikely. The lock is intact, and the watchman reported no breaches. Yet someone entered this room, or Thorne admitted them. Lestrade crossed his arms. You're building castles in the air, Holmes. The watchman saw no one, and the museum's locked tighter than the Bank of England at night. Then we must consider, Holmes replied, that the killer was already inside door, that Thorne's death was no sudden event. He turned to the desk sifting through the papers. Among them was a ledger detailing acquisitions from a recent expedition to Thebes, including a reference to a pharaoh's mask, provenance disputed. A letter, half-written, lay beneath it, addressed to a Professor Harlan Croft, its tone sharp and accusatory. "Croft," Holmes said, his voice low. "A rival in Egyptology, known for his contentious disputes with Thorne over tomb discoveries. This letter suggests a falling out. Watson, note the ink still wet in places." Thorne was writing this when interrupted. I peered at the letter, which accused Croft of spreading false claims about a recent find. A motive, perhaps. I suggested. Professional jealousy. Perhaps, Holmes mused. But the mask sent to me why? To taunt, to warn, or to mislead. He pocketed the letter and turned to Lestrade. "I'll need access to Thorne's correspondence and the museum's visitor logs for the past week. And, Watson, we must visit Mrs. Thorne. A widow's grief often reveals more than official reports." As we left the office, the weight of the mystery settled upon me. The museum, with its silent relics, seemed to watch us depart, as if guarding secrets older than the stones themselves. In the cab back to Bloomsbury, Holmes was silent, his mind no doubt racing through the labyrinth of possibilities. I, too, pondered the death mask, its serene features haunting my thoughts. Who had cast it, and why had it been sent to Sherlock Holmes? Chapter 3. The widow's tale. The rain had ceased by the time our hansom cab rattled into the quiet streets of Bloomsbury, leaving behind the imposing shadow of the British Museum for the more subdued elegance of Georgian townhouses. The afternoon light, filtered through clouds, cast a muted glow upon the brick facades, their windows reflecting the damp sheen of the pavement. Dr. Elias Thorne's residence stood at the end of a crescent, its black door framed by ivy that clung stubbornly, despite the autumn chill. As we alighted, Sherlock Holmes's keen eyes swept the exterior, noting, no doubt, details invisible to my own, perhaps the faint scuff of a boot on the step, or the angle of a curtain drawn aside. "Observe, Watson," he remarked, pausing. "At the gate, the knocker is polished to a mirror shine, yet the brass shows faint scratches, as if struck with impatience. A household under strain, perhaps." I nodded, accustomed to his habit of reading significance in the mundane. "Grief often disrupts routine," I offered. "Mrs. Thorne may be struggling to maintain appearances." Holmes's lips twitched in what might have been a smile, or concealing more than sorrow. "Let us see." We were admitted by a maid, a nervous girl whose eyes darted between us as she took our hats and coats. The interior of the house was as refined as its exterior promised, with polished oak floors and walls adorned with engravings of Egyptian landscapes, pyramids, under starlit skies, the Nile winding through reeds. Yet there was an air of neglect. A vase of wilted roses stood on a sideboard, and a faint layer of dust coated the banister, suggesting the staff had been distracted from their duties. Mrs. Amelia Thorne received us in the drawing-room, a space of understated opulence with damask curtains and a marble fireplace where a low fire crackled. She rose from a velvet settee, a woman of perhaps 40, her dark hair swept into a severe chignon, her morning dress of black bombazine accentuating the pallor of her face. Her eyes, veiled by a lace handkerchief she clutched tightly, were red-rimmed but dry, and her bearing suggested a composure that bordered on rigidity. "Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson," she said, her voice low and measured. "I expected your visit, given the circumstances. Pray, be seated." We took the offered chairs, and I noted the room's details. A cabinet of curiosities displaying scarab amulets and small alabaster figures. A photograph of Dr. Thorne in desert attire beside a camel, and a stack of scholarly journals on a side table, their pages marked with ribbons. Holmes, as was his wont, wasted no time on pleasantries. "Mrs. Thorne," he began, leaning forward, his hands clasped. "Your husband's death is a matter of great interest to me, not least because of an unusual delivery I received yesterday, a death mask, cast from his likeness, sent anonymously to my rooms. Can you shed light on this?" Her fingers tightened on the handkerchief, and for a moment her composure wavered. A flicker of something fear perhaps, or calculation crossing her features. "A death mask," she repeated, her tone one of surprise that seemed rehearsed. "I know nothing of such a thing. Elias was found dead only yesterday morning. Who could have made it so swiftly?" "Precisely my question," Holmes replied, his eyes never leaving her face. "The mask is of exceptional craftsmanship, suggesting access to your husband's body shortly after death. Tell me, when did you last see him?" She lowered her gaze to the handkerchief, smoothing it with deliberate care. "The evening before last. He dined at home, then returned to the museum to work late, as was his habit. He was overseeing the arrival of artifacts from his latest expedition, a collection from Thebes, including a funerary mask of some minor pharaoh. He spoke of it with excitement, though he dismissed its supposed curse as nonsense. A curse?" I interjected, my curiosity piqued. "What was said of it?" She hesitated, as if weighing her words. "Only village tales from the dig site, warnings that those who disturb the pharaoh's rest invite calamity." Elias laughed it off. He was a man of science, not superstition. Holmes's expression remained impassive, but I sensed the wheels of his mind turning. Did he mention enemies, Mrs. Thorne? Rivals who might resent his discoveries? Her lips pressed into a thin line. There was Professor Harlan Croft, of King's College. They quarreled bitterly over a tomb Elias excavated. Last year, Croft claimed Elias had stolen credit for the find, even accused him of falsifying records. It was an ugly affair, played out in academic journals and lecture halls. Holmes nodded, as if this confirmed a suspicion. "And visitors? Did anyone call upon your husband that evening, either here or at the museum?" "None here," she said firmly. "He left alone after dinner. As for the museum, I cannot say. He often worked into the night, undisturbed." I studied her as she spoke, noting the controlled precision of her movements, the way her hands betrayed no tremor despite her recent loss. As a physician, I had seen many widows, and grief manifested in myriad ways, but there was something in her demeanor too composed. Perhaps that stirred my suspicion. Holmes rose, pacing slowly to the cabinet of curiosities, where he examined a scarab carved from lapis lazuli. "Your husband's work involved plaster casts, did it not, for preserving delicate artifacts?" "Yes," she replied, a touch of wariness in her voice. "He and his assistants often made molds to study inscriptions without damaging the originals. And you, Mrs. Thorne, are you skilled in such techniques?" Her eyes narrowed slightly. "I assisted him occasionally, as a matter of interest." "Why do you ask?" Holmes turned, his gaze piercing. "Because the mask sent to me was no amateur's work. It required skill, access, and opportunity. If not you, then who?" She stood abruptly, her handkerchief falling to the floor. "I resent the implication, Mr. Holmes. My husband is dead, and you speak of masks and murder as if I were a suspect." "Calm yourself, madam," Holmes said smoothly. "I seek only the truth. If you know nothing of the mask, then we must look elsewhere. But I advise you to be forthcoming, for secrets have a way of surfacing." As we took our leave, I retrieved her handkerchief from the floor, intending to return it. My fingers brushed against its fabric, and I paused. A faint grit clung to the lace, not unlike the plaster dust we had seen in Thorne's office. I said nothing, but Holmes's glance told me he had noticed my hesitation. Outside, the drizzle had resumed, and we paused beneath the awning of a nearby shop. "What do you make of her, Watson?" Holmes asked, lighting a cigarette. "She's hiding something," I said. "Her grief seems genuine, yet too controlled. And that handkerchief plaster, Holmes, I'm certain of it." He nodded, exhaling a plume of smoke that mingled with the mist. "Indeed, Mrs. Thorne is no mere mourner. She knows more than she admits, though whether of the mask or her husband's death, I cannot yet say. The reference to Croft is promising, but we must tread carefully. The threads of this mystery are tangled, and the truth lies deeper than a widow's tears." Our next destination, Holmes declared, would be Professor Croft's residence in Kensington. As we climbed into another cab, the death mask's serene features haunted my thoughts, its inscription echoing like a riddle, "For the eyes that see all." What had Thorne seen, and who had ensured he would see no more? Chapter 4. The Rival's Shadow. The drizzle had thickened into a steady rain as our cab wound its way from Bloomsbury to Kensington, the wheels hissing on the wet cobblestones and the gas lamps casting fleeting halos through the downpour. Sherlock Holmes sat in silence, his sharp profile etched against the dim interior, his fingers drumming lightly on the handle of his stick. I knew from long experience that his mind was weaving a tapestry of deductions, each thread of evidence plaster dust, wax smudges, Mrs. Thorne's guarded demeanor being meticulously aligned to form a pattern as yet invisible to me. "Watson," he said at length, breaking the silence, "what do you know of Professor Harlan Croft?" I cast my mind back, recalling snippets from scholarly circles. "Not much, I'm afraid. A prominent Egyptologist, though less celebrated than Thorne. I believe he's at King's College, known for his work on the Middle Kingdom. The papers mentioned his feud with Thorne over a tomb discovery, something about disputed credit." Holmes nodded, his eyes glinting in the half-light. "A feud is a fertile soil for motive. Men have killed for less than academic glory. We must ascertain whether Croft's resentment extended beyond words." We alighted in Kensington, before a tall, narrow house of red brick, its windows glowing warmly against the gloom. The street was lined with plane trees, their leaves dripping mournfully, and the air carried the faint scent of wood smoke from nearby chimneys. Holmes rapped sharply on the door, and we were soon admitted by a butler, a stooped man with the air of one accustomed to serving an exacting master. Professor Harlan Croft received us in his study, a cavernous room that seemed a museum in miniature. Shelves groaned under the weight of artifacts, alabaster canopic jars, bronze statuettes of Anubis, and papyri framed behind glass. A long workbench ran along one wall, cluttered with tools for restoration, brushes, chisels, and a basin of plaster, its surface still damp. Croft himself was a formidable figure, broad-shouldered and barrel-chested, with a mane of grey hair and a voice that boomed like a lecture hall orator. His eyes, small and shrewd, assessed us with a mixture of curiosity and defiance. "Mr. Sherlock." "Holmes," he said, rising from behind a cluttered desk. I've heard of your meddling in matters best left to professionals. And you, Dr. Watson, the chronicler of his exploits. To what do I owe this intrusion? Holmes's smile was thin, almost predatory. No intrusion, Professor, but a quest for clarity. Dr. Elias Thorne is dead, and a death mask bearing his likeness was sent to me, inscribed with a challenge. You knew him well. I understand perhaps too well. Croft's face darkened, his jaw tightening. Thorne dead. Shocking, but hardly unexpected. The man drove himself to exhaustion, scrambling through desert tombs and squabbling over scraps of glory. Heart failure, the papers say. So they claim, Holmes replied, his gaze drifting to the workbench. But I am less convinced. You and Thorne quarrelled over a tomb in Thebes, did you not? A dispute bitter enough to warrant accusations of theft. Croft snorted, folding his arms. Thorne was a charlatan, passing off my discoveries as his own. That tomb sealed for 3 millennia was mine by right of excavation. He swooped in with his museum backing and claimed the credit. But murder, preposterous. Holmes stepped toward the workbench, his fingers brushing the edge of a plaster mold. You are skilled in casting, Professor. These tools suggest a craftsman's hand. The mask Pod sent to me was no amateur's work. Could it be yours? Croft's eyes flashed with anger. You dare accuse me? I restore artifacts. Yes, cleaning, casting, preserving. It's my trade, as it was Thorne's. But I've no time for macabre jests or vendettas. I watched the exchange, noting Croft's defensiveness, the way his hands clenched as Holmes probed. The room felt oppressive, the weight of ancient relics seeming to crowd the air. My eye caught a small detail, a smear of red wax on the workbench, similar to that found in Thorne's office. Holmes, too, noticed it. This wax, he said, pointing, is of a type used to seal crates from Egypt. Curious to find it here, so far from the museum. Were you there recently, Professor? Croft hesitated, then waved a dismissive hand. I visit the museum often. It's my field. Perhaps, system, I tracked it in your grasping at straws, Holmes. Perhaps, Holmes said, his tone deceptively mild, yet straws may point to the wind's direction. Tell me, where were you the night before last, when Thorne died? Croft's face reddened. At a lecture in Oxford, as any number of colleagues can attest. I returned to London yesterday morning. Now, if you've no further accusations, I have work to do. Holmes inclined his head, as if conceding the point, but I knew he was far from satisfied. As we left the study, he paused at the door, his eyes scanning the floor. Interesting, he murmured. The carpet here Persian, recently cleaned, yet bearing traces of the same fine dust we found in Thorne's office. And those boots by the door museum, dust clings to their soles. Outside, the rain had eased, leaving a chill mist in its wake. Holmes lit a cigarette, his expression thoughtful. Croft is a man of passion and pride, Watson. His alibi may hold, but his resentment is palpable. We must verify his Oxford lecture dates, times, witnesses. And that wax and dust, too many coincidences for my taste. I nodded, my mind turning over the encounter. He's a proud man, Holmes. If Thorne humiliated him, he might have sought revenge, but a death mask. That's theatrical, even for a scholar. Precisely, Holmes said, exhaling a plume of smoke. The theatricality suggests intent to impress, to mislead, or to warn. We must dig deeper into Croft's movements and his access to Thorne's office. As we hailed another cab, the weight of the mystery grew heavier. Croft's bluster, the wax, the dust all pointed to a connection, but the motive and method remained elusive. The death mask, with its serene yet accusing face, seemed to mock us from afar, its inscription a riddle yet unsolved, for the eyes that see all. Chapter 5. The midnight intruder. The rain had dwindled to a faint mist as we returned to Baker Street, the gas lamps casting a spectral glow upon the wet pavement. The journey from Kensington had been marked by Sherlock Holmes's silence, his mind no doubt dissecting the threads of evidence we had gathered. The plaster dust in Thorne's office, the wax on Croft's workbench, and the guarded demeanour of Mrs. Thorne, I too was preoccupied, the image of the death mask, its serene, yet unsettling features lingering like a ghost in my thoughts. The inscription, for the eyes that see all, seemed to taunt us, a cipher to a truth we had yet to unravel. As our cab drew up to 2-1B, Holmes's sharp eyes caught a flicker of irregularity. "Watson," he murmured, his voice low, "the door is ajar. Mrs. Hudson would never be so careless." I felt a prickle of our knees, my hand instinctively reaching for the service revolver I still carried from my army days. Holmes, with the stealth of a cat, alighted and approached the door, his stick held like a weapon. The lock showed no signs of tampering, but the faint creak of the hinges as he pushed it open confirmed his suspicion. We entered cautiously, the familiar stairwell now seeming fraught with menace. The air was heavy with the scent of tobacco and chemicals, but there was something else, a faint, acrid tang that did not belong. The sitting room door stood open, and the sight within stopped us cold. The room, so orderly in its chaos when we had left, was now a scene of disarray. Papers lay strewn across the floor, the contents of Holmes's desk appended, and the death mask, our grim talisman, lay shattered in fragments upon the rug, its plaster shards glinting in the firelight. A chair had been overturned, and the curtains hung askew, as if someone had torn at them in haste. Holmes's face hardened, his eyes sweeping the room with predatory intensity. "A hurried search," he said, stepping over the debris. They sought something specific, and they were not subtle about it." He knelt by the mask's remains, his magnifying glass in hand. "The break is deliberate, struck with force, not dropped. This was no accident, Watson." I scanned the room, my heart pounding. Could it be a warning, or were they after the mask itself? Holmes did not answer immediately, his attention fixed on a faint smudge near the fireplace. "Boot polish," he murmured, mixed with the same fine plaster dust we found in Thorne's office. "Our intruder is connected to the museum, or has been there recently." He rose, moving to the window, which was locked but bore a faint scratch on the sill, similar to the one in Thorne's office. No forced entry here, either. They had a key, or Mrs. Hudson was deceived. As if summoned by her name, our landlady appeared at the door, her face pale with alarm. "Mr. Holmes." "I heard nothing. I was in the kitchen, preparing supper. The door was locked when I last checked. I swear it." Holmes's expression softened, though his eyes remained sharp. "Calm yourself, Mrs. Hudson. When did you last see the door secured?" "An hour ago, sir, when I brought up the evening post. I'd have noticed anyone coming in." Holmes nodded, dismissing her gently. "Stay below, and admit no one without my word." As she retreated, he turned to me. The intruder was swift and silent. Watson, a professional, or someone familiar with this house. But what did they seek? Before I could hazard a guess, a rustle from the shadows of the hallway froze us both. Holmes's hand darted to his pocket, producing the revolver he kept for such contingencies. "Show yourself," he commanded, his voice like steel. A figure stumbled into the light, a young man, no more than 25, his clothes disheveled, his face flushed with exertion. His eyes, wide with panic, darted between us. "Mr. Holmes," he gasped, raising his hands. "Don't shoot. I'm Jonathan Thorne, Dr. Thorne's son. I came to warn you the mask is cursed." I lowered my own weapon, though Holmes kept his steady, his gaze unyielding. "A dramatic entrance, Mr. Thorne," he said coolly. "Explain yourself, and quickly." "Did you ransack my rooms?" "No," the young man protested, collapsing into a chair. "I arrived moments ago, saw the door open, and feared the worst. I meant to warn you, not harm you." Holmes lowered his revolver, but did not holster it. "Warn me of what? Speak plainly." Jonathan's hands trembled as he spoke, his words tumbling out in a rush. "My father's expedition in Thebes unearthed a pharaoh's mask, said to be cursed. The locals warned him. Those who disturb it die." He laughed, called it superstition, but now he's dead, and that mask you received, it's a sign. The curse is real, and it's coming for you. Holmes's eyes narrowed, his skepticism palpable. "Curses are the refuge of the feeble-minded, Mr. Thorne. Your father died in his office, surrounded by artifacts, not spirits. Why come to me now, and why this clandestine approach?" Jonathan swallowed hard, his gaze flickering to the shattered mask, the inscription for the eyes that see all. "Father mentioned you once, said you were the only man who could unravel a mystery like this, I thought. If anyone could stop it, it's you." I studied the young man, noting the sweat on his brow, the wild earnestness in his eyes. As a physician, I recognized fear, but whether it stemmed from superstition or guilt, I could not tell. "Did you see anyone leave as you arrived?" I asked. "No," he said, shaking his head. "The street was empty, but I heard footsteps above as I climbed the stairs." Holmes paced to the fireplace, his mind racing. "Your father's death, the mask, this intrusion all connected, yet the motive remains obscured. Tell me, Mr. Thorne, who knew of your father's work on this cursed mask?" Jonathan hesitated, then said, "Only his closest associates, Professor Croft, his assistants at the museum, and ... my mother. She helped with his casts sometimes." Holmes's gaze sharpened. "Your mother, you say? Interesting. And where? Were you the night your father died?" "At home, with mother," he replied quickly. "We dined together after father left for the museum. I swear it." Holmes exchanged a glance with me, and I knew he was weighing the boy's words against the evidence. "Very well," he said at last. "You will remain here until I verify your story. Watson, search the upper rooms. Our intruder may have left." Traces. I complied, checking the bedrooms and Holmes's laboratory, but found nothing amiss beyond the chaos in the sitting room. Returning, I reported my findings, and Holmes nodded, his expression grim. The intruder was precise. They wanted the mask destroyed, or something hidden within it. But they were interrupted, perhaps by your arrival, Mr. Thorne. He turned to the young man. "You will accompany us tomorrow. We have more questions, and your presence may loosen tongues. For now, Watson, let us restore order here and consider our next move." As we set about tidying the room, salvaging what we could of the shattered mask, I felt the weight of the mystery deepen. Jonathan's tale of a curse seemed fanciful, yet the intrusion was all too real. Who had violated the sanctity of Baker Street, and what secret did the death mask conceal? The night closed in around us, the fog pressing against the windows, and I knew that Holmes's relentless mind would find no rest until the truth was laid bare. Chapter 6. Echoes from the Nile. The night had deepened into a restless quiet by the time we restored order to the sitting room at 2-1B Baker Street. The shattered fragments of the death mask lay gathered in a tin box, their jagged edges a mute testament to the violence of the intruder's purpose. Jonathan Thorne, still shaken but resolute, had been persuaded to remain under our watchful eye, ensconced in a spare chair with a blanket and a glass of brandy to steady his nerves. Sherlock Holmes, his earlier vigour undimmed, sat cross-legged on the rug, sifting through a pile of papers borrowed from Dr. Thorne's office, his pipe sending curls of smoke toward the ceiling. I, weary from the day's exertions, took my place by the fire, my notebook open to record the unfolding mystery. "Watson," Holmes said, his voice cutting through the stillness, "these documents may hold the key to our puzzle." Thorne's expedition to Thebes was no mere academic venture. It was fraught with intrigue. He held up a letter, its edges yellowed but its ink still vivid. "This is from a correspondent in Cairo, warning Thorne of a figure known as Silas Blackwood, an antiquities dealer suspected of trafficking in stolen relics. Thorne was cautioned to avoid him, yet there are notes here suggesting they met." I leaned forward, intrigued. Blackwood, a smuggler, then? Could he be connected to the mask? Holmes's eyes gleamed with the intensity of a hound on the scent. "More than connected, I wager. Blackwood operates from the docks, a shadow in the underbelly of London's trade with the East. If Thorne crossed him, or owed him a debt, we may have found our motive, or at least a piece of it." He handed me the letter, penned in a hurried scrawl by one Dr. Mahmoud Halil, an Egyptian archaeologist who had assisted Thorne's dig. The text detailed Blackwood's reputation, a man of charm and menace, known to procure rare artifacts for private collectors, often bypassing legal channels. Khalil warned that Blackwood had taken an interest in a particular item from Thorne's excavation, a funerary mask of a lesser-known pharaoh, said to be of immense value, not for its gold, but for its historical significance. The letter ended with a plea. "Do not trust Blackwood, Elias. His promises are as fleeting as the desert wind." I set the letter down, my mind racing. If this mask is so valuable, could Blackwood have killed Thorne to secure it? Holmes tapped his pipe against his lips. "Possible, but the death mask sent to me complicates the matter. It was cast from Thorne's own face, not an ancient relic. Why create such a macabre object, and why send it to me? Blackwood's involvement suggests a deeper game perhaps, a theft gone awry, or a warning to others." Jonathan, who had been listening in silence, stirred. "Father mentioned Blackwood once, in passing. He said the man offered to fund the expedition in exchange for a share of the fines, but Father refused. Could Blackwood have sought revenge?" Holmes's gaze flicked to the young man, assessing. "Revenge is a crude motive, but greed is universal. We shall pay Mr. Blackwood a visit at dawn. The docks are his domain, and the truth may lurk among his crates." I glanced at the clock. It was nearing midnight. "Shall we rest, Holmes? The day has been long." He waved a dismissive hand. "Rest is for those without purpose, Watson. But you and young Thorne may retire. I shall pore over these papers and prepare for our foray." Reluctantly, I escorted Jonathan to a spare room, ensuring he was settled, before returning to my own. Sleep, however, was elusive. My dreams were haunted by visions of mummified faces and shadowed figures creeping through fog-laden alleys. The death mask's inscription echoed in my mind, a riddle that seemed to grow more inscrutable with each passing hour at dawn. We set out for the East End, the sky a leaden grey that promised more rain. Jonathan accompanied us, his presence a necessary risk, as Holmes believed his knowledge of his father's work might prove useful. The docks were a world apart from the refined streets of Kensington or Bloomsbury, a maze of warehouses, cranes, and ships unloading their exotic cargoes. The air reeked of tar, fish, and the brackish temps of the Thames, and the cries of dockworkers mingled with the screech of gulls. Holmes led us to a warehouse marked with a faded sign, Blackwood and Sons, Importers. The building was a hulking structure of weathered brick, its windows grimy and its doors guarded by a burly man who eyed us with suspicion. Holmes, undeterred, presented his card with a disarming smile. Sherlock Holmes, consulting detective. I seek Mr. Silas Blackwood on a matter of urgency. The guard grunted, disappearing inside. Moments later, we were ushered into a dimly lit office, its walls lined with shelves of artifact statues, amulets, and sealed crates stamped with foreign marks. Silas Blackwood stood behind a desk, a gaunt man with a sallow complexion and eyes that gleamed like polished obsidian. His suit was impeccably tailored, but his smile held the sharpness of a blade. "Mr. Holmes," he said, his voice smooth as oil, "your reputation precedes you. And Dr. Watson, describe of your adventures. To what do I owe this visit?" Holmes wasted no time. "Dr. Elias Thorne is dead, and a death mask bearing his likeness was sent to me. I understand you had dealings with him in Cairo, dealings that soured." Blackwood's smile did not falter, but his fingers tightened on a pen. "Thorne, a pity. He was a man of ambition, but poor judgment. Yes, we spoke in Cairo. I offered to finance his dig, but he declined, claiming his museum's funds were sufficient. A fool's choice, but not my concern. And the funerary mask from Thebes?" Holmes pressed. "You coveted it, did you not?" Blackwood laughed, a cold, mirthless sound. "Coveted? I deal in artifacts, Mr. Holmes, not fairy tales. Thorne's mask was valuable, yes, but he refused to part with it. Dead men pay no debts, so what motive would I have?" Holmes stepped closer, his gaze unyielding. "Perhaps you sought to send a message. The mask sent to me was cast from Thorne's face, post-mortem. Your warehouse is equipped for such work, plaster molds, the tools of the trade." I noticed a crate in the corner, its lid ajar, revealing plaster molds similar to those in Thorne's office. Blackwood followed my gaze, his expression tightening. "My business is legitimate," he snapped. "I cast replicas for collectors. Nothing more. Accuse me if you dare, but you'll find no proof." Before Holmes could reply, a sudden crack split the air. A gunshot, close and sharp. I dove to the floor, pulling Jonathan with me as Holmes spun toward the window. The glass was intact, but the shot had come from outside. We scrambled to the door, the guard already shouting, but the fog-shrouded docks offered no glimpse of the assailant. A bullet had grazed the crate, splintering its edge, and Holmes's face was grim as he examined it. "A warning," he said, "or a miscalculation. Blackwood, you have enemies, or allies who act rashly." The dealer's composure had cracked, his eyes darting nervously. "I know nothing of this. Leave my warehouse, Holmes, and take your suspicions with you." We retreated, the docks now alive with the clamor of workers drawn by the shot. In the cab back to Baker Street, Holmes was silent, his mind turning over the encounter. "Blackwood is involved," he said at last, "but not alone. The shot suggests panic or a desire to silence us. We must tread carefully, Watson, for the Nile's echoes carry far." Chapter 7. The smuggler's denver encounter at Blackwood's warehouse had left us shaken, the sharp crack of the gunshots still echoing in my ears as our cab rattled away from the docks. The fog had thickened, cloaking the East End in a shroud that muffled the clatter of hooves and the distant cries of dock workers. Sherlock Holmes sat beside me, his face a mask of concentration, his fingers steepled beneath his chin. Jonathan Thorne, pale and silent, clutched the seat, his eyes darting to the windows as if expecting another shot to pierce the gloom. The bullet had grazed my hat, leaving a singed tear in the brim, a stark reminder of the danger now stalking us. "Watson," Holmes said at last, his voice low and deliberate. "That shot was no accident. Someone wished to intimidate us, or worse." Blackwood's denial was too practiced, his composure too brittle. He knows more than he admits, but he is not the master of this game. I nodded, my heart still racing. The plaster molds in his warehouse identical to those in Thorne's office. Could he have cast the death mask? Possible, Holmes replied, but unlikely. Blackwood is a dealer, not an artist. The mask's craftsmanship suggests a hand more skilled, more intimate with Thorne's circle. We must look closer to home, Mrs. Thorne, perhaps, or even young Jonathan here. Jonathan started, his voice sharp. "Me, I'd never harm my father. I came to warn you, Mr. Holmes, not to be accused." Holmes's eyes flicked to him, unyielding but not unkind. "Calm yourself, Mr. Thorne. Your fear is genuine, but fear can mask guilt as easily as innocence. Your presence at Baker Street last night, so soon after the intrusion, raises questions. For now, you remain under my scrutiny." The cab deposited us at Baker Street, where the familiar sight of 2-to-1 be offered little comfort. Mrs. Hudson greeted us with anxious queries, but Holmes waved her off, his mind already racing ahead. Inside the sitting room, he lit his pipe and paced, the tin box of shattered mask fragments glinting on the table. "We have 3 threads," he said. "Blackwood's smuggling, Croft's rivalry, and Mrs. Thorne's reticence. Each points to the museum and to that cursed pharaoh's mask. We must unravel their connections." I settled into my chair, my notebook open. "What next, Holmes? Blackwood's warehouse is a fortress, and Croft's alibi may hold. Shall we pursue the autopsy report?" Holmes paused, his gaze fixed on the fire. "The autopsy, yes, but first, another visit to the docks." Blackwood's denial was too vehement, and that shot suggests desperation. "We shall return under cover of night, when his guards are less vigilant." Jonathan protested, "At night. After that shot, it's madness." "Madness," Holmes said with a thin smile, "is often the cloak of clarity. You may remain here, Mr. Thorne, under Mrs. Hudson's care. Watson, your revolver will be needed." As dusk fell, we prepared for our nocturnal venture. Holmes donned a dark overcoat and cap, blending into the shadows, while I checked my Webley, its weight reassuring in my pocket. The fog had thickened into a choking veil, rendering the streets a labyrinth of indistinct shapes. We took a circuitous route to the docks, avoiding main thoroughfares, our footsteps muffled by the damp air. Blackwood's warehouse loomed like a squat fortress, its windows dark save for a faint glow from the upper floor. Holmes led us to a side alley where a rusted gate hung ajar. "The guard is at the front," he whispered. "This is our entry." We slipped inside, the air heavy with the scent of tar and old wood. The warehouse was a maze of crates and barrels, stacked high with goods from distant land, silks from China, spices from India, and artifacts wrapped in oilcloth. Holmes moved with purpose, his pocket lantern casting a narrow beam. We reached a locked door marked private, and Holmes produced a set of picks, working the lock with the dexterity of a surgeon. Inside was a smaller room, its walls lined with shelves of artifacts more precious than those outside, golden amulets, jade scarabs, and a sealed crate bearing the same Cairo stamp we had seen in Thorne's office. Holmes knelt beside it, his fingers tracing the wax seal. "This is it. What's in the crate Thorne was unpacking when he died? Blackwood has it, or a duplicate." As he pried open the lid, revealing straw and a wrapped object, a shadow moved behind us. I spun, revolver raised, but it was only a rat scurrying across the floor. My heart pounded, the silence oppressive. Holmes uncovered a plaster mold, its surface etched with hieroglyphs. "A replica," he murmured, "but of what?" "The pharaoh's mask." Before he could examine further, a creak from above froze us. Footsteps, heavy and deliberate, echoed on the stairs. Holmes doused the lantern, pulling me behind a stack of crates. A figure descended, a lantern in hand, revealing the gaunt features of Silas Blackwood himself. He moved to the crate, muttering under his breath, his fingers brushing the mold with a reverence that belied his earlier dismissal. "Thorne's folly," he whispered, unaware of our presence. "You thought to cheat me, but I'll have it yet." Holmes signaled for silence, but the moment was shattered by a second figure, a man in a dark cloak, his face obscured. "You've lingered too long, Blackwood," the stranger hissed. "The mask is gone, and Holmes is sniffing about. End this now." Blackwood's voice was sharp. "I didn't kill Thorne. The mask was sent to throw suspicion elsewhere. You know who did it." The stranger laughed, a chilling sound. "And you'll take the fall if I say so. Find the real mask, or you'll join Thorne." They moved away, their voices fading. Holmes's eyes gleamed in the dark. "A conspiracy, Watson. Blackwood is a pawn, not the king. We must retreat for now." We slipped out as silently as we had entered, the fog swallowing our tracks. Back at Baker Street, Holmes was ablaze with energy. "The real mask's the pharaoh's relics, the key. Thorne died for it, and someone seeks to control it. Tomorrow, we pursue the autopsy and confront Jonathan again. His fear may yet betray the truth." As I retired, the weight of the night's revelations pressed upon me. Blackwood's words, the stranger's threat, the mold in the cradle pointed to a web of deceit spun around an ancient artifact. The death mask, shattered though it was, seemed to watch us still, its secrets buried in the echoes of the Nile. Chapter 8. The Autopsy Revelation. The revelations from Blackwood's warehouse lingered like the fog that clung to London's streets as we made our way to the morgue the following morning. The air was crisp, carrying the faint chill of approaching winter, and the sun struggled to pierce the haze that shrouded the city. Sherlock Holmes, ever the embodiment of focused energy, strode ahead, his coat billowing like a cape, while I kept pace, my mind replaying the overheard conversation between Blackwood and the mysterious stranger. Jonathan Thorne had been left at Baker Street under Mrs. Hudson's vigilant eye, his protests silenced by Holmes's assurance that his safety depended on discretion. The morgue, situated in a grim building near St. Bartholomew's Hospital, was a place I knew all too well from my medical days, a sterile realm of marble slabs and the sharp scent of carbolic acid. The attendant, a dour man with a perpetual squint, recognized me and led us to the examination room without question. Inspector Lestrade awaited us there, his face etched with impatience, a sheaf of papers in hand. "Holmes," he said by way of greeting, "you've got your autopsy, but it won't change much. The doctor's report is clear. Heart failure. No signs of violence. You're chasing shadows." Holmes's lips curved into a faint smile. "Shadows often conceal the substance. Lestrade, what's in here will assist in a re-examination. Fresh eyes may reveal what haste overlooked." I donned a white apron, my physician's instinct stirring as I approached the slab where Dr. Elias Thorne's body lay, covered by a sheet. The room was cold, the only sound the drip of a faucet echoing against the tiled walls. Pulling back the sheet, I noted the body's condition, rigid with rigor mortis. The skin pallid, the features matching the death mask in every detail. High forehead, the trimmed beard, the scar above the brow, with Holmes and Lestrade observing. I began the procedure, my scalpel making the initial incision with practiced precision. The chest cavity revealed no immediate anomalies, no hemorrhage, no puncture wounds. The heart, upon extraction, showed signs of strain. Enlarged ventricles, consistent with chronic overwork, but nothing to suggest acute failure induced by poison or blow. "See," Lestrade grunted. "Natural causes, as I said." But Holmes's gaze was fixed on me, expectant. "Continue, Watson." The lungs examined them closely. I complied, removing the lungs and noting their unusual weight. Slicing into the tissue, I discovered a fine, white powder embedded in the alveoli, coating the bronchial passages. It was not the soot of London's air, nor the residue of tobacco, but a powdery substance that clung like dust from a quarry. "Plaster," I said, holding up a sample on my blade. "Fine plaster dust, inhaled in quantity. This man didn't die of heart failure. He asphyxiated, his lungs filled until he could no longer breathe." Lestrade's eyes widened, asphyxiated. But how? There was no struggle, no marks on the throat. Holmes leaned in, his magnifying glass hovering over the sample. "Precisely, no struggle because it was subtle. Wet plaster, perhaps, applied over the face, suffocating him as it hardened. The death mask was cast directly on Thorne while he yet lived, or in the throes of death. The process itself, the murder weapon." I shuddered at the implication, the victim's final breaths trapped beneath a layer of hardening plaster. His features captured in eternal repose. "A cruel method," I murmured, "requiring knowledge of casting and access to his office undisturbed." Holmes nodded, pocketing a sample of the dust. "The plaster matches what we found in his office, on Mrs. Thorne's handkerchief, and in Croft's study. And Blackwood's warehouse abounds with it. But who wielded it? The mask was sent to me post-mortem, suggesting the killer wished to involve me, or to divert suspicion." Lestrade scratched his chin, his skepticism waning. "If it's murder, we'll need proof. The coroner missed this how? Overworked perhaps," I suggested, "or influenced to see only the obvious. Heart failure is common in men of Thorne's age and profession." We left the morgue with the report amended, Lestrade promising to alert his superiors. Outside, the fog had lifted slightly, revealing the bustling streets, but Holmes's mood was contemplative. "This confirms foul play, Watson, but complicates the motive. If the pharaoh's mask is the prize, why kill Thorne before securing it? Unless he hid it, and the death mask holds a clue. He paused at a telegraph office, wiring requests to verify Croft's Oxford alibi and to summon Jonathan for further questioning. "The boy knows more," Holmes said as we walked. "His cursed tale is a smokescreen, but for what?" Back at Baker Street, Jonathan awaited us, his face drawn with anxiety. Holmes wasted no time. "Your father was murdered, Mr. Thorne suffocated by plaster. You spoke of a curse, but this is human villainy. What do you conceal?" Jonathan paled, sinking into a chair. "Murdered? God? No. I suspected, but hoped it wasn't true. Father had debts from the expedition. Blackwood funded part of it secretly, against father's better judgment. When the pharaoh's mask proved valuable, Blackwood demanded it as payment. Father refused, planning to donate it to the museum. And Croft? I asked. Croft knew of the debts, threatened to expose father unless he shared credit for the find. But murder? I can't believe it." Holmes's eyes bored into him. "And your mother? She assisted in casts. Could she have?" "No." Jonathan cried. "She loved him, despite their arguments. But she did make masks family portraits, even. Father taught her." Holmes exchanged a glance with me. "A family affair, perhaps. We must confront them all. The truth lies in the intersections of greed, rivalry, and loyalty." As the day waned, Holmes dispatched wires to assemble the suspects at the museum the next evening. The pieces were falling into place. But the stranger from Blackwood's warehouse loomed in my mind, a shadowy figure whose identity might hold the final twist. Chapter 9. The Family Secret. The revelations of the autopsy had cast a grim shadow over our investigation, transforming the enigma of Dr. Elias Thorne's death from a question of natural causes to one of calculated murder. The morning sun, struggling through the persistent London fog, did little to dispel the chill that had settled in my bones as we sat in the sitting room of 2-1B Baker Street. Sherlock Holmes, his energy undimmed by the sleepless nights, pored over his notes. The tin box of shattered masked fragments, a constant reminder of the violence that had invaded our sanctuary. Jonathan Thorne, still our reluctant guest, sat by the window, his face pale and drawn, his fingers fidgeting with a loose thread on his cuff. The weight of his father's murder, confirmed by my findings in the morgue, seemed to press heavily upon him. Yet his eyes held a flicker of something, fear, guilt, or perhaps both, that Holmes had not missed. "Watson," Holmes said, breaking the silence, "the plaster in Thorne's lungs is the linchpin of this affair. It ties the murderer to the museum, to the craft of casting, and to the death mask itself. We must now unravel the human elements, motive, opportunity, and deceit." I nodded, my notebook open, the pages filled with the day's grim discoveries. Jonathan's story of debts and Blackwood's demands suggests greed as a motive. But the method, suffocation by plaster, is so specific, it points to someone intimate with Thorne's work. Holmes's gaze shifted to Jonathan, who flinched under its intensity. "Indeed, Mr. Thorne, you have spoken of curses and debts, but there is more you withhold. Your mother's skill with casts, your father's hidden dealings. Tell me, what secrets did your family guard?" Jonathan's shoulders slumped, his voice barely above a whisper. "I've told you all I know, Mr. Holmes. Father was in over his head with Blackwood, and Croft's threats made it worse. Mother, she was loyal to him, but they argued often about money, about his obsession with that cursed mask." Holmes leaned forward, his eyes like twin lancets, argued how. Be precise. Jonathan hesitated, then sighed. Father spent beyond our means on the Thebes expedition. The museum's funds weren't enough, so he borrowed from Blackwood, promising a share of the fines. When the pharaoh's mask proved valuable, he refused to give it up, saying it belonged to history. Mother was furious. She feared ruin if Blackwood exposed the debt, but she'd never hurt him. She made casts for him, yes, but only to preserve artifacts. Or so I thought. Holmes's expression was unreadable, but I sensed the wheels of his mind turning. And you, Mr. Thorne, you dined with your mother that night, you said. Yet, you arrived at Baker Street mere moments after our rooms were ransacked. A coincidence, or something more? Jonathan's face flushed. I swear, I only came to warn you. I heard of the mask sent to you father's colleagues were whispering about it at the museum. I thought the curse had followed him, that you were in danger. Holmes rose, pacing to the fireplace, where he tapped his pipe against the mantel. A curse is a convenient fiction, but the ransacking of my rooms was not. Someone sought to destroy or retrieve something in that death mask. Your mother's handkerchief, stained with plaster, suggests she is no stranger to the craft. Did she ever cast a mask of your father before his death? Jonathan's eyes widened, a flicker of realization crossing his face. She did. Once, as a keepsake. Father taught her the technique years ago, for fun. They made masks of each other, even of me when I was a boy. But that was long ago. I interjected, my medical mind seizing on the detail. A keepsake. Could such a mask have been used as a template for the one sent to Holmes? Holmes nodded, his gaze never leaving Jonathan. An excellent question, Watson. A pre-existing mold could be adapted, but the mask we received was fresh, cast post-mortem, with plaster dust matching that in Thorne's lungs. Your mother's skill makes her a candidate, Mr. Thorne, whether you admit it or not. Jonathan stood, his voice trembling with indignation. You accuse my mother of murder. She's grieving, broken by father's death. I won't stand for this. Holmes's tone was icy. Sit, Mr. Thorne. Accusations are premature, but facts are not. Your mother's handkerchief, the plaster in your father's office, the mold in Blackwood's warehouse all converge. We shall confront her, but first we return to the museum. There are documents yet to examine, and Croft's alibi must be verified. We set out for Bloomsbury, leaving Jonathan under Mrs. Hudson's care once more, with strict instructions to admit no one. The British Museum loomed through the fog, its grand portico a silent sentinel over secrets ancient and modern. Inspector Lestrade met us in the antiquities wing, his expression a mix of grudging respect and exasperation. Holmes, he said, handing over a sheaf of papers, I've got the visitor logs and Croft's alibi. He was in Oxford, all right at 8 that evening, stayed at the Randolph Hotel. Witnesses confirm it. He couldn't have been in London when Thorne died. Holmes scanned the logs, his eyes narrowing. And these visitors? Anyone unusual the night of Thorne's death? Lestrade shrugged. The usual scholars, assistants. No one out of place, except a late delivery from Cairo, signed for by Thorne himself. Holmes's interest sharpened. A delivery, the crate we saw in his office. Who brought it? A dock worker, name of Harris, works for Blackwood's firm. We've questioned him, says he left it at the door and saw no one. Holmes pocketed the log, his mind racing. Harris may be a link to Blackwood's stranger. We must find him. But first, Mrs. Thorne. We returned to the Thorne residence, where Mrs. Amelia Thorne received us with the same rigid composure, though her eyes betrayed a flicker of unease. Holmes wasted no time. "Mrs. Thorne, your husband was murdered, suffocated by plaster. You are skilled in casting. Did you create a mask of him, perhaps one used to kill?" Her face paled, her hands clenching the arms of her chair. "How dare you? I loved Elias, despite his flaws. Yes, I made cast keepsakes, nothing more. I was home that night with Jonathan. Ask him." "We have," Holmes said, his voice unrelenting. "Your handkerchief bore plaster dust, identical to that in your husband's lungs." "Explain," she faltered, then recovered. "I helped Elias with his work sometimes. I must have handled plaster. Days before, I know nothing of his death." Holmes's gaze held hers, searching for truth. "Very well. But secrets unravel, Mrs. Thorne. If you conceal anything, it will surface." As we left, I whispered to Holmes, "She's lying, or at least not telling all. The plaster, her skillet's too convenient." He nodded, his expression grim. "She is a piece of the puzzle, Watson, but not the whole. The stranger in Blackwood's warehouse holds the key. We must find Harris, and soon." The day drew to a close with the mystery deepening, the threads of family secrets, smuggled artifacts, an academic rivalry weaving a tapestry as intricate as any Egyptian hieroglyph. The death mask, though shattered, seemed to whisper its challenge, still urging us toward a truth buried in deception. Chapter 10. The Dockworker's Tale, the Fog of London. Ever a faithful companion to our investigations, had thickened into a dense veil by the time Sherlock Holmes and set out once more for the East End. The revelations of Mrs. Thorne's reticence, and the damning plaster dust in her husband's lungs had sharpened our purpose, and Holmes's insistence on tracking down Harris, the dockworker, linked to Blackwood's firm, brooked no delay. The streets were slick with the day's earlier rain, and the gas lamps cast feeble pools of light, barely penetrating the murk. My Webley revolver, tucked in my coat, offered a grim reassurance as we navigated the labyrinthine alleys toward the docks, where the air carried the briny Thames of the Thames and the distant creak of moored ships. Holmes, his face half hidden by the brim of his cap, moved with the silent grace of a predator, his eyes scanning every shadow. "Watson," he murmured, "Harris is a small cog in this machine, but even cogs can reveal the workings of the whole." He delivered the crate to Thorne's office. Perhaps he saw more than he claims. I nodded, my breath visible in the chill air. If he's Blackwood's man, he may be loyal or frightened into silence. That gunshot at the warehouse suggests Blackwood's associates are desperate. Desperate, yes, Holmes agreed, but not reckless. The shot was a warning, not a kill. Harris may be the key to identifying Blackwood's mysterious ally. We reached a squalid tavern near the docks, its sign the anchors rest swaying. In the wind, Lestrade's inquiries had pointed us here, where Harris was known to drink after his shifts. The interior was a haze of tobacco smoke and the reek of stale ale, crowded with dockworkers, sailors, and less savory types. Holmes, with his chameleon-like ability to blend into any setting, adopted the slouch of a laborer, while I followed, my hand never far from my revolver, at a corner table. We found Harris a wiry man with a weathered face, his hands calloused from years of hauling crates. He was nursing a pint, his eyes darting nervously as if expecting trouble. Holmes approached with a disarming smile, sliding into a chair opposite. "Him, Mr. Harris," he said, his voice low but firm. "We have business concerning Dr. Elias Thorne." You delivered a crate to his office the night he died. What did you see? Harris's glass froze halfway to his lips, his eyes narrowing. Who are you? I told the police, dropped the crate, left. Didn't see no one. Holmes leaned closer, his gaze piercing. I am Sherlock Holmes, and lies will not serve you. The crate came from Blackwood's firm, and Thorne was murdered shortly after. You know more than you admit. Harris paled, his fingers tightening on the glass. Murdered? I heard it was his heart. Look, I'm just a hauler. Blackwood pays me to move goods, not ask questions. Then answer mine, Holmes pressed. Who was with Thorne that night? Or did you linger, perhaps to spy for your employer? Harris glanced around, his voice dropping to a whisper. I didn't spy, but ... there was someone. I left the crate at the door, like I said, but as I turned to go, I saw a woman slip into the museum. Dark hair, dressed in black, moving quick-like. Didn't see her face, but she wasn't no scholar. I exchanged a glance with Holmes, my mind flashing to Mrs. Thorne in her morning dress. A woman, I asked. Could it have been Mrs. Thorne? Harris shrugged, uneasy, couldn't say. I didn't stick around. Blackwood don't like us poking into his business. But he was angry that night, muttering about Thorne cheating him. Said something about a mask. Not the one in the crate, but another, the real one, he called it. Holmes's eyes gleamed. The real one. And this woman, did Blackwood mention her? No, Harris said, but he's got someone high up pulling strings. I heard him talking to a gent once. Posh voice, not from the docks. Didn't catch a name, but Blackwood was scared of him. Holmes slipped a coin across the table, his voice softening. You've done well, Harris. Say nothing of this to Blackwood, or you'll answer to Scotland Yard. We left the tavern, the fog swallowing us once more. As we walked, Holmes's mind was clearly racing. A woman in black, he mused, and a posh stranger. Mrs. Thorne fits the description, but the stranger from Blackwood's warehouse's voice was refined, commanding. We are closing in, Watson, but the web is intricate. Back at Baker Street, we found Jonathan Thorne pacing the sitting room, Mrs. Hudson hovering anxiously. Holmes wasted no time. Mr. Thorne, a witness places a woman at the museum the night your father died, dark-haired, dressed in black. Your mother was home with you, you claim. Can you swear to her presence all evening? Jonathan's face drained of color. She was with me, yes, until I went to bed. But she was upset, talking about father's debts. I didn't think. Holmes cut him off. Think now, did she leave the house after you retired? Jonathan hesitated, his eyes darting to the floor. I heard the door close, late, but I thought it was the maid. I swear, Mr. Holmes, I didn't know. I felt a pang of pity for the young man, caught in a maelstrom of suspicion, but Holmes's expression was unrelenting. Your mother's involvement is now undeniable. Tomorrow, we confront her at the museum, with Blackwood and Croft present. The truth will surface, whether through confession or deduction. As we prepared for the confrontation, Holmes examined the fragments of the death mask once more, his magnifying glass tracing the edges. There's something here, what's seen a faint mark, etched inside a shard. Hieroglyphs, perhaps, or a code. It may be the clue Thorne died to protect. The night closed in, the fog pressing against the windows, and I felt the weight of the mystery intensify. A woman in black, a hidden mask, a shadowy mastermind. The pieces were aligning, but the final picture remained obscured. Tomorrow's gathering promised to be a crucible where secrets would burn away under Holmes's relentless scrutiny. Chapter 11. The confrontation. The morning of the confrontation dawned with a cold clarity. The fog that had cloaked London for days, finally lifting to reveal a sky of brittle blue. Sherlock Holmes was a figure of restless energy as we prepared to depart for the British Museum, where he had arranged for Mrs. Amelia Thorne, Professor Harlan Croft, Silas Blackwood, and Jonathan Thorne to convene under the pretext of discussing the late Dr. Elias Thorne's final expedition. Inspector Lestrade would be present, his presence ensuring official weight, though Holmes had warned him to let the proceedings unfold without interference. My Webley revolver, tucked securely in my coat, was a grim reminder of the dangers we had already faced, and I sensed the net was tightening around the truth. "Watson," Holmes said as we rode in the hansom cab, his voice low and measured, "today we unravel the web. The death mask, the plaster dust, the pharaoh's relic all converge here. Watch their faces, their hands' guilt betrays itself in the smallest gestures." I nodded, my notebook tucked in my pocket, ready to record the denouement. Mrs. Thorne's presence at the museum that night, as Harris claimed, is damning. But the stranger in Blackwood's warehouse, who could he be? Holmes's eyes glinted. "That is the final piece, Watson. Blackwood is a pawn, Croft a rival. Mrs. Thorne a suspect, but the stranger pulls the strings. The hieroglyphs on the mask shard may hold the key, but first we provoke a reaction." The British Museum's Antiquities Wing was a cavern of echoes as we entered, its marble halls lined with artifacts that seemed to watch our procession with silent judgment. Lestrade met us at the entrance to Dr. Thorne's office, where a long table had been set for the meeting. The crate from Cairo, still partially unpacked, stood in the corner, its contents now under police guard. One by one, the summoned arrived. Mrs. Thorne, her face pale but composed in her black morning dress. Croft, his broad frame filling the doorway, his eyes wary. Blackwood, sleek and guarded, his smile as sharp as ever. And Jonathan, trailing behind, his expression a mix of dread and defiance. Holmes took his place at the head of the table, his presence commanding silence. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice cutting through the tension. "Dr. Elias Thorne was murdered, suffocated by plaster in this very room, his death mask cast as he died. The killer is among us, and the motive lies in the pharaoh's mask he unearthed in Thebes, a relic of incalculable value, coveted by many." Mrs. Thorne's hands clenched, but she said nothing. Croft snorted, folding his arms. "Preposterous, Holmes. I was an Oxford Juve, checked my alibi, and I've no skill with plaster." Blackwood leaned back, his eyes narrowing. "Nor I. Thorne's death is a tragedy, but I'm a businessman, not a murderer. You've no proof." Holmes's gaze swept the room, lingering on each face. "Proof lies in the details. Plaster dust was found in Thorne's lungs, on Mrs. Thorne's handkerchief, in Professor Croft's study, and in Mr. Blackwood's warehouse. A woman was seen entering the museum that night, dark-haired, dressed in black." He turned to Mrs. Thorne. "You, madam, have the skill to cast a mask, and your alibi is unconfirmed after your son retired." Mrs. Thorne's composure cracked, her voice rising. "I was home, Jonathan told you. I loved Elias. Why would I kill him?" Jonathan interjected, his voice trembling. "She was with me, Mr. Holmes. I swear it." Holmes ignored him, producing a shard of the shattered death mask from his pocket. This fragment bears hieroglyphs not ancient, but freshly etched, a code. I deciphered it this morning, a reference to a hidden vault in this museum, where Thorne concealed the pharaoh's mask to keep it from Blackwood's grasp. Blackwood's smile faltered, his fingers twitching. A vault? Nonsense. Thorne never mentioned such a thing. Holmes pressed on, relentless. You, Mr. Blackwood, funded Thorne's expedition, expecting the mask as payment. When he refused, you grew desperate. But you were not alone. A stranger, a man of refined voice, was overheard in your warehouse, orchestrating this affair. Who is he? The room fell silent, the tension palpable. Then a new voice cut through a cultured, commanding tone from the doorway. Enough. Holmes. A man stepped forward, tall and impeccably dressed, his face obscured by a scarf until he pulled it down, revealing features I recognized with a shock. Sir Reginald Vance, a trustee of the museum, known for his patronage of antiquities. Sir Reginald. Lestrade gasped, his hand moving to his truncheon. Holmes's eyes gleamed with triumph. The puppet master, you oversaw Thorne's work, knew of the mask's value, and used Blackwood to pressure him. When Thorne hid the mask, you acted through an accomplice. Vance's smile was cold. You're clever, Holmes, but you lack proof. Thorne's death was an accident over work, nothing more. Holmes turned to Mrs. Thorne. Not so. You were here that night, weren't you? Coerced by Vance, perhaps, to cast the mask as a warning to others. Your skill, your presence confirmed by Harris the dockworker. Mrs. Thorne's resolve crumbled, tears streaming down her face. I didn't mean to kill him. Vance threatened ruin our debts, our reputation. He forced me to meet Elias, to cast a new mask as a threat. I mixed the plaster, but it was too wet, it smothered him. I didn't know, Jonathan cried out, lunging toward Vance, but Lestrade restrained him. Holmes continued, his voice steady. Vance orchestrated this to secure the mask for his private collection, using Blackwood's greed and your desperation. The death mask was sent to me too. Draw me in to muddy the waters. Vance laughed, but it was hollow. A fine tale, but you'll find no vault, no mask. You've nothing to hold me. Holmes stepped to the crate, lifting a false bottom to reveal a hidden compartment. Inside lay the pharaoh's mask, its gold and lapis gleaming. The vault was Thorne's desk, cleverly concealed. Your game is over, Sir Reginald. Lestrade signaled his men, and Vance was seized, his protests drowned by Mrs. Thorne's sobs. Blackwood, seeing the tide turn, attempted to slip away, but Holmes's sharp command halted him. You'll answer for your part, Blackwood. The law will untangle your dealings. As the suspects were led away, the museum's halls seemed to exhale, the weight of ancient secrets lifting. Back at Baker Street, Holmes sat by the fire, his pipe alight. A tragedy of greed and betrayal, Watson. The death mask was both weapon and warning, but the eyes that see all mine have prevailed. I nodded, my notebook heavy with the tale. The pharaoh's mask, now safe in the museum's vaults, was a silent witness to human folly, its curse not supernatural, but born of ambition and deceit. Chapter 12. The final veil, the resolution at the British Museum, had lifted the oppressive weight of the mystery. Yet, as Sherlock Holmes and I returned to the familiar confines of 2-1B Baker Street, a sense of unease lingered. The pharaoh's mask, now secured in the museum's vaults, was a testament to Dr. Elias Thorne's integrity. But the human cost his life, his wife's betrayal, and the exposure of Sir Reginald Vance's machinations cast a long shadow. The fire crackled in our sitting room, its warmth a stark contrast to the chill of the truths we had uncovered. Holmes, seated in his armchair, puffed thoughtfully on his pipe, while I, pen in hand, prepared to chronicle the final chapter of this grim affair. "Watson," Holmes said, breaking the silence, "the case is closed, yet one detail nags at me: the death mask's delivery to our doorstep. It was a calculated act, not merely to taunt, but to ensure my involvement. Why?" I set my pen down, considering. "Vance admitted to using Mrs. Thorne to cast the mask, but sending it to you seems reckless. It drew your attention, ensured the truth would surface." Holmes nodded, his eyes narrowing. "Precisely. Vance is cunning, a collector who thrives on control. Yet this act feels like a misstep or a deliberate challenge from another hand. We must revisit the evidence." He rose, retrieving the tin box containing the shattered fragments of the death mask. Spreading them on the table, he examined each piece with his magnifying glass, his fingers tracing the faint hieroglyphs he had deciphered as a reference to the hidden vault. "These marks," he murmured, "were etched post-casting, a message not from Thorne, but from his killer or an accomplice. There is a mind behind this I have not yet fully grasped." Before I could respond, a sharp rap at the door startled us. Mrs. Hudson entered, her face pale. "Mr. Holmes, a letter delivered by a boy who ran off. It's marked urgent." Holmes took the envelope. It sealed plain, but the paper of fine quality. He slit it open, his eyes scanning the contents with growing intensity. "Listen, Watson," he said, reading aloud. "Mr. Holmes, you have uncovered much, but not all. The pharaoh's mask is safe, but its secret remains. Meet me at St. Paul's Cathedral, the Whispering Gallery, at midnight. Come alone, or the truth dies with me." A friend, I felt a chill, my hand instinctively moving to my revolver. "A trap, Holmes. Vance is in custody. Blackwood and Mrs. Thorne as well. Who could this be?" Holmes's lips curved into a grim smile. "Not a trap, Watson, but a confession or a gambit. The writer knows too much to be a bystander. I shall go, but not alone. You'll accompany me, concealed in the shadows." We prepared swiftly, Holmes donning his darkest coat, I ensuring my revolver was loaded. The streets of London were quiet, the fog returning in wispy tendrils as we approached St. Paul's, its great dome looming like a sentinel against the night sky. The Whispering Gallery, high within the cathedral, was an eerie place, a circular walkway where a whisper could carry across the vast dome. We entered silently, Holmes ascending the narrow stairs alone while I lingered below, hidden in an alcove, my eyes straining in the dim light at the stroke of midnight. A figure appeared opposite Holmes, a woman, her face veiled, her movements cautious, her voice, low and tremulous, carried clearly to my hiding place. "Mr. Holmes, I am Dr. Mahomed Halil's sister, Amelia. My brother wrote to Elias, warning him of Blackwood. I was his assistant, uncredited, and I know the truth." Holmes's voice was calm, probing. "Speak, Miss Khalil. What truth remains?" She hesitated, then continued. "Elias hid the pharaoh's mask, not just from Blackwood, but from Vance, who sought it for a collector in Paris. I helped Elias etch the hieroglyphs on the death masker map to the vault, meant for you, to ensure the mask's safety. But I didn't know Mrs. Thorne would kill him. She acted under Vance's coercion, but I sent the mask to you, hoping you'd unravel it." Holmes leaned forward, his silhouette sharp against the gallery's curve. "Why not come forward sooner? And why this secrecy?" "Fear," she whispered. "Vance has agents everywhere. I fled Cairo after Elias's death, but I couldn't let his sacrifice be in vain. The mask holds a secret beyond its valuer. Papyrus inside, detailing a lost tomb. Elias died to protect it. I gripped my revolver, scanning for threats, but the cathedral was silent save for their voices. Holmes's tone softened. You've done well, Miss Khalil. Come with us, and we'll ensure your safety. She nodded, lowering her veil to reveal a face etched with resolve. As they descended, I joined them, my heart pounding with the weight of her revelation. At Baker Street, Amina recounted her story in full, her brother's warnings, her role in Thorne's expedition, and the desperate act of sending the death mask to draw Holmes into the case. The papyrus, now recovered from the pharaoh's mask, confirmed her tailor map to a tomb in the Valley of the Kings, its location a secret. Thorne had guarded with his life. Holmes wired Lestrade, ensuring Amina's protection and the papyrus's transfer to the museum. As dawn broke, he sat by the fire, his pipe alight. The case is complete. Watson, Vance's greed, Mrs. Thorne's desperation, Blackwood's complicity, all fueled by a relic's allure. But Amina Halal's courage and Thorne's sacrifice ensured its preservation. I closed my notebook, the tale complete. A grim business, Holmes. The death mask was a cruel irony, a monument to Thorne's death, yet the key to his legacy. He nodded, exhaling a plume of smoke. The eyes that see all, Watson, are not mine alone, but those of truth itself. Let this be a lesson. No secret, however ancient, can escape the light of reason.